Okay, everybody, this is Joseph P. Farrell with News and Views from the Nefarium for Thursday, January 9th in the year 2014. We're now 2 years beyond Thunderdome, but always ready to take any apocalyptic happening and spin it in an apocalyptic way. I've read now online that there are some people spinning the Fukushima mess in terms of the 2012 Mayan calendar. So go figure, folks. Anyway, I have a bit of housekeeping I want to take care of, and then I want to move on very quickly into what I want to talk about today, which is once again about space matters. The house cleaning is this. Towards the end of this month, the management of my apartment complex, in its infinite wisdom, has decided they are simply going to change the cable company from what it was, which was very acceptable here where I live, to another company. And as I get all of my phone and internet through the old cable company, this means that I might be down uh, and offline for a day or two, possibly longer, while all this gets sorted out. So please bear with me, folks. I do have a members vid chat scheduled for Friday, January 31st, and that just happens to be the day that the management of this apartment complex, in its infinite wisdom, decided to do the changeover. So I have no idea what's going to go on, how it's going to affect the website and everything. So please, please bear with me through that change. All right, now, as I promised, space is in the news. And I had several of you send me these two articles. The first one was actually sent to me by several of you, which includes former Assistant Secretary of HUD, Catherine Austin Fitts, because as many of you know, she and I have been exploring a scenario, if you will, a model of what we think might be going on in terms of finance, retrenchment by the elites into North America, and so on. And we definitely believe space is a part of this story. And we definitely also believe that it involves hidden space program, hidden technologies, and so on, that they appear to be ready to roll out in a public fashion to a certain extent. Now, in that regard, the first article I want to refer to here, I'll link these for you, is an article that's, the title says it all. It says, quote, Boeing to use former space shuttle hangar for secret space plane, unquote. Now listen very carefully, folks. This is a very important article. And I'm going to read a few paragraphs from this for you so that you get the idea of what's going on. It says this, quote, a former NASA space shuttle hangar will serve as the new home and servicing facility for a fleet of secretive military space planes. The Boeing company announced on Friday, January 3rd, that's just a week ago, that it began converting the orbiter processing facility at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida to support the U.S. Air Force's X-37B orbital test vehicle. Built by Boeing's Phantom Works, the winged X-37B space plane resembles in some way a smaller version of NASA's shuttle with a 15-foot wingspan. Now, recall that this is the Air Force's drone space plane, all right? It's sent up on, piggybacked on rockets or on top of rockets like the space shuttle, but it lands like the space shuttle as a glider, as an aircraft. And it has a companion that's been in orbit now for over a year performing some secret classified military mission, which has led people to a lot of speculation. So they're converting the old space shuttle facility in the Kennedy Space Center in Florida to service this vehicle. But now the article goes on to say something very significant. Listen very carefully. Quote, the hangar is the second NASA orbital servicing facility to be commercially leased under an agreement with Space Florida, the state's spaceport authority, and Aerospace Development Agency. So in other words, we're looking at another story that deals now with the theme of spaceports and the development of space as a commercial enterprise with states overseeing spaceport development. Quote, Boeing also took over the use of the OP-3 to support its CST-100 spacecraft, a crewed capsule being developed to potentially fly NASA astronauts to and from the International Space Station. Now, folks, I have no idea what this vehicle is. I haven't had time today, being rather snowed under with a bunch of other business, to look up what this craft is. But I suspect that even if it's a conventionally launched shuttle-type craft, in other words, it's launched vertically on rockets and lands horizontally like an aircraft, I suspect that even if that's the case, that what we're really looking at is the long-term planned rollout of aircraft, spacecraft that take off like aircraft using long, long runways and orbit, achieve low Earth orbit, and then again land like aircraft. This is what I suspect we are being prepared to encounter. Now, let me finish this article. It says, quote, that facility, now referred to as the Commercial Crew and Cargo Processing Facility. Did you catch that? The Commercial Crew and Cargo Processing Facility, or C3PF, is nearing the end of its conversion to begin manufacturing and testing the 5-seat gumdrop-shaped spacecraft. Now, let me continue with a couple more paragraphs later in this article. The U.S. Air Force Rapid Capabilities Office launched the X-37-3B missions for unknown purposes since 2010. Now, couple those two statements together. They are setting up a manufacturing facility for these commercial spacecraft that carry crews, and I suspect a manufacturing capability for this unmanned U.S. Air Force kind of space drone, if we can call it that. So this is a significant development because it's hinting, I think, very strongly at the increasing commercialization of space and the increasing militarization that always accompanies commercialization. Now, in that respect, I've been suggesting in a couple of recent books, Covert Wars, Breakaway Civilizations, and Covert Wars and Clash of Civilizations, that there is a hidden agenda here in the collateralization of space, and that is to militarize space as quickly as possible. And I have suggested that part of the reason for this is the long-term potential concern of the UFO to the national security state. In other words, they've wanted to militarize space. They've probably been doing it. In my opinion, they have been for quite some time. And by militarization, I mean more than just putting up reconnaissance platforms, folks. I mean putting up actual weapons platforms in space. I think this has already been done. But now, to kind of give us another preparation for the increasing militarization of space openly, there's an article in RT that is reporting on an American general, General Shelton, 4-star General Shelton, from the U.S. Air Force Space Command. And this article says it all. Quote, U.S. military satellites vulnerable in future space war dash Space Command Chief, unquote. Now, this is a very interesting, provocative article because you have to read between the lines. Let me state something here by quoting 3 paragraphs, actually 6, 7 paragraphs from this article. Quote, according to the latest annual report of the U.S. U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, the test reflects China's intent. This is talking about a Chinese anti-satellite weapons system test. The test reflects China's intent to develop an anti-satellite capability to target satellites in an altitude range that includes U.S. Global Positioning System, GPS satellites, and many U.S. military and intelligence satellites. Another scare for the U.S. military is a group of small maneuverable systems reportedly launched by China as part of its anti-satellite program. Now, let me stop there. I blogged about 2 weeks ago on the website about the new surveillance system that the U.S. Air Force is setting up in outer space, ostensibly to monitor objects as small as softballs in order to keep the security of satellites that the United States, Europe, and other nations have orbited in nearby space secure. Now, we have here an admission in this article connecting the dots between the two that China is constructing or developing a set of very small maneuverable satellites. So presumably part of that reconnaissance capability is to track these new anti-satellite weapons. Let me continue now with the RT article. Quote, U.S. defense officials have disclosed last January that one of the Chinese systems includes a robotic arm that can be used to capture or destroy orbiting satellites. And I would aver that the real intent is to capture. That's an easy way to pluck someone else's technology, bring it back down to China, examine it, and reverse engineer a lot of it. Even China's successful landing of a robot rover on the moon in December is proof of the country's aggressive space program, General Shelton has argued. According to him, space, the ultimate high ground, has become contested in all orbits and filled with man-made threats. Now, that's the phrase, folks, that leapt out at me when I was reading this article. Because the initial impression that that careful wording wants to give you is, in my opinion, precisely this idea that we're concerned with space warfare in Earth orbit at all orbit altitudes or levels. But if you stop and consider, that's really not what's being said. There's no limit here to the orbits that are being talked about. If you look at it a certain way, the probes that we send to the other planets in the solar system could also, in a certain sense, be considered to be in orbit. So I suspect that behind the careful wording here, there is something else going on that includes things not in orbit around Earth, but possibly that they're even thinking about further out, that this terrestrially based warfare or competition between the powers on Earth, between the space powers on Earth, is going to be extended far, far beyond Earth. This is becoming the theme, I think, that they're pushing in order to accustom us to the development of military capabilities in space and the public admission of it. Now, let me continue with the RT article here. Quote, warning that signs of a radically different space environment, please catch the phrasing again, a radically different space environment are all there. General Shelton stressed he is not a fan of waiting for catastrophe to propel change. He called for switching to architectural alternatives which are now studied by the military and industry, unquote. Now let me stop there because, again, the phrasing here is very peculiar. A radically different space environment is the phrase I want to focus on. Because if we stop and examine what is being said here, do satellite technologies or anti-satellite weapons, even if they are ground-launched and capable of reaching orbit to take out a satellite, as is understood to be some of the capabilities that the Chinese are trying to develop, even if that's the case, are any of those things a radical space environment? And I would submit to you, even with the Boeing unmanned aircraft and manned spacecraft and speculations about horizontal takeoff and landing of aircraft, even with all of those things, is it possible to view that as radical? In my opinion, no. So I'm suggesting that behind all of this, there is another difficulty, and that is, or another interpretation, another possibility, and that is that they're looking at something beyond merely terrestrial possibilities. That would be the radical space environment. And I suspect that, given the whole UFO context of the national security state, I suspect that this is really what we are looking at. Now, let me continue. Quote, such alternatives, meaning architectural alternatives, include replacing large multiple payload satellites by numerous smaller and simpler systems that will at least complicate the targeting calculus of potential adversaries. Now, Did you catch that? They are admitting the vulnerability of American and other nations' geosynchronous satellites, its reconnaissance platforms, telecommunications, and so on. They're admitting those vulnerabilities in having them all packaged in one big, huge satellite. So the solution is to present lots of multiple targets, each target having perhaps only one system that it is responsible for, rather than one satellite with multiple systems. Now, again, I submit to you that that's a calculus that would apply equally not only to any potential terrestrial adversary, but also to a potential extraterrestrial one. And this, I think, is really what we have to be careful of, because we're being told, or this whole dialogue is being framed in terms of potential terrestrial threats. But the language that they're choosing is very carefully guarded, because it also admits of the interpretation or the possibility that they are strategically thinking and planning for something else. And I suspect that's what's really going on. Shelton also advocated the use of disaggregation, the disaggregation method in U.S. military space missions, such as equipping commercial communications satellites with missile warning sensors. Now stop and consider that, because what that is really telling you is that commercial interests will be allowed not only to pack their satellites with missile detection sensors, but will be granted the ability to defend their interests. Okay, in other words, it would be like the space version of the Rent-A-Cop platform. Okay, this is what they're telling you they're doing. At the same time, the American general said joining the International Space Code of Conduct put forth by the European Union and promoted by Russia and China would unnecessarily constrain U.S. operations in space. In other words, to me, folks, that sounds like an admission that the American national security state isn't really concerned about competition from Russia and China. There's another player or another factor that they're worried about, that a merely terrestrial approach is going to constrain their field of action. This is what I think the language has become code for. All right. With that, I see I've gone a bit over my 15 minutes, so I better wrap it up here, folks. But watch space now very carefully, because I think what we're seeing are all the signs of future slow, gradual rollout of technologies that already exist and that they're admitting to, or that they are that they have under development that they're willing to admit to. But there's a context now to the whole space issue that their carefully chosen words are, if you look at them, are suggesting that there's more than just a terrestrial concern that they have in mind. Anyway, that's it for me for News and Views from the Nefarium this week, January 9th, 2014. I'll see you on the flip side, everybody. God bless.